India needs more women at the workplace. However, the numbers are not looking good.
Workforce for many decades has been dominated by men, and therefore workforce practices were designed to cater to men. Society is not set up to support women, and then when they get into the workforce, the workplace is not set up to really support them.
Let's talk about unpaid labor. Women currently in India are doing 10 times more chores than men who do much less, and globally it's 3 times.
She's contributing to the financial aspects of the family. Then it is time for the male role to evolve. One woman said that she was going to get married, and her seniors got to know, and they asked her to sign an agreement which said that she will not leave the job for 2 years. She will not ask to move to a different city for 2 years.
I'm surprised they didn't say, I'm not going to conceive for the next 2 years. My guest today is Nupur Garg, founder of Winpe. Hello and welcome to What India Needs podcast with me, Shutapa Paul. India needs more women at the workplace. However, the numbers are not looking good. In 2017-2018, we had a little over 23% women participating in the workforce. That increased a little bit to 37% in 22-23. However, a lot more needs to be done. Where are we going wrong? How do we change perceptions both at home and at the workplace? And are women truly helping themselves? My guest today is Nupur Garg, founder of Winpe, a not-for-profit that's driving gender diversity in the PVC and startup ecosystem. Thank you so much, Nupur, for coming on What India Needs podcast.
My pleasure, Shutapa. Thank you for having me.
So my first question is, what is your overview on, why we are kind of fumbling with the increase of women in the workforce? We're just not managing to touch those numbers that we should be.
So I think there are multiple reasons at play. Let me start with the societal factors, the socio-economic factors. And, a lot of this is going to be generalization because we're also talking about different segments of society. But by and large, when we think about it, society has, accorded a certain role for women to play. The role has been of a homemaker, somebody who sort of grows up, cooks for the family, looks after the house, looks after the children. And that role, for some reason, for many decades, has been considered appropriate for women regardless of their levels of education. So, even if it's a woman in a rural part of India, her primary role is to look after the house and the family and the kids, etc. All the way up to a woman who's Ivy League educated, it is expected that when push comes to shove, she's the one who's going to sort of sacrifice her career or take a back seat in her career and prioritize family and kids, etc. So that is one big thing, the stereotype that exists around which role suits women better, what is the role that men play versus what is the role that women play. And that stereotypes becomes a part of the upbringing that society gives to girls. One example that I have recently found to be quite evocative of this is, if you have both a boy and a girl, you'll probably tell the girl, come with me in the kitchen, or, sort of you'll say, come help me put flowers on the walls or tidy up the house or let me look after the guests, etc. And you'll probably tell the boy, here is some money, go to the market, get me some bread, right? So boys get exposure to financial transactions, to going out, being independent, exposed to the world, etc., at a much younger age than generally speaking girls do. And like I said, there is a generalization in this, but when we look at population at a large, I think this is how society is looking at bringing up girls, and none of this is ill-intended and none of this is intended to hold them back. It's just the way things are. It's also about safety. It's not safe to send girls out, but whatever it is, this is how it happens. And then if you take it forward to the workforce, again, for historical reasons, workforce has been dominated by men. We all know that before the World War, it was all men at the workplace, and it was only during the world wars that women started to enter the labor force because there were no men, everybody was at war, right? So the workforce for many decades has been dominated by men, and therefore workforce practices were designed to cater to men, right? I mean, if women were always in the workforce, maternity benefits or parental benefits, as I prefer to call them, even things like lactation rooms, flexi working, remote working, would have been quite prevalent. But it is just that women are entering the workforce now. And suddenly people need to think about, oh, what are the things that we need to provide because of the changing roles? And I don't believe this is something that you need to provide specifically for women, right? And that is why I prefer the term parental benefits. We need to think about parental benefits because the roles are changing. And now both men and women have started taking responsibility for looking after children, for example. So instead of thinking about, oh, we need to provide maternity benefits if we hire women, I think all the progressive organizations, all the organizations that are really doing well in employee retention, etc., have now started to think about the concept of benefits that can be provided to every member of the workforce.
Right.
So but that is a
More
very yeah,
inclusive.
it's a very slow change to happen. So it's all about, society is not set up to support women, and then when they get into the workforce, the workplace is not set up to really support them in the way that they need to be supported, and all of that adds up.
The pace of change is slow. I mean, it
It's
could
very
be
slow.
faster.
It could be much faster. And I'll talk to you about private equity and venture capital, which is the area that I focus on. The first report that I found with data is from 2017. It talks about 2016 data. And it says at an overall level, women are about 20% of the alternate investments industry. It is the same today.
Exactly.
So the pace of change is very slow.
So, somewhere there is, would you say that even though we're talking about it, we're not really walking the talk in the sense that we're not, making those crucial changes on ground at various levels, not just in PVC or corporate world, but across the spectrum?
I would definitely say that. I would definitely say that there are enough constituents and enough stakeholders who are not doing their bit. The good news is there is still change happening, and I think that's what keeps all of us going. But yes, I agree. Change is uncomfortable, but change is also a constant.
Yeah.
It's difficult for organizations to say we need to change everything that we've been doing so far. And I think another big challenge that we've had is that a lot of organizations that have championed for change may have maybe taken an approach which has tried to point fingers and blame. And I don't think that's the right
That
approach,
works.
because if you put people on the defensive and you start to say you're doing something wrong,
Yeah.
you're really not getting to a solution.
Correct, correct. So let's talk about unpaid labor, right? Because I think this is what we as women, both of us are women, and we know how it works differently. So some stats. Apparently, women, their quantification of unpaid labor is 66% of the work that they do, whereas for men it's about 12%. Women currently in India are doing 10 times more chores than men who do much less, and globally it's 3 times. So in Indian women are doing much more. Married women obviously do more chores and more housework than unmarried women. And women who are employed do much more work than employed men. So it's like 6 times more than an employed man a woman is working. So somewhere we are also expecting women to be super women. घर का काम भी करो, बाहर भी करो. So it's a lot of unpaid work which could be productive, constructive, paid for work.
See, there is also the concept of invisible labor, if we can add on to this, right?
Yeah.
And I read this in a report, the street vendor who comes out, who leaves in the morning with his stall of pani puri. His wife has probably woken up very early in the morning and made the pani puri and the pani and all of that stuff. And when we are capturing in our various reports, we are talking about him as a labor, but we've forgotten that the wife has worked towards it. So there is also invisible labor. But the way I think about it is so that is the economist point of view. When people are trying to talk about the GDP and how much we could increase the GDP, etc. But from my point of view, it's all about saying how are both men and women exercising choice and respecting each other's choices. And when we talk about, say, working women who are married and who could have kids or older parents to look after, and how they're maybe doing more work as compared to their male counterparts, I think it's about changing roles in society, that women are no longer considered relegated only to the home, but at the same time the male role needs to change as well
As well.
to
Yeah.
accommodate and to partner with the changing role of the woman. So if she's stepping out and being in being an equal part of, say, the earning responsibility, if she's contributing to the financial aspects of the family, then it is time for the male role to evolve and say that I will also partner in
Yeah.
the work that needs to be done at home. And again, I think it is a bit of a partnership. And I have a classic example. I'm a finance professional, right?
Right.
Hardcore investor, etc., etc. I do not look after any of my personal finances. My husband does that.
Right.
It's not that I'm not empowered, it's not that I'm not financially literate. It's just a choice that I have made, that listen, this bit of work I would rather you
You
do,
take. Correct.
and there is another bit of work that I would do myself.
Right.
So it does come down to a partnership also. So I always tell people, let's not judge who's doing what, as long as we are sure that it is a choice that they have made and we are able to respect those choices. So for me, it is all about, so when people talk about lean in and say that there is a concept of having it all, I say that have it all is not even a real concept. You've just created a term
Yeah.
just based on what you think is having it all. My
Right.
definition of that could be very different from your definition of that. What is
Absolutely.
all?
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
I think the more terms and more jargon we coin, the more difficult we make it. And the more
For
difficult
ourselves also.
for ourselves also. And we just sort of, continue a conversation which probably is not in the right direction. I think it is all about saying, let's be inclusive, let's respect each other, and let's treat each other as equals. And within that, everybody has their own decisions and choices to make.
Yeah. It's so interesting that you mentioned about GDP and the economic aspect of it. Apparently, unpaid labor, as per SBI analysis, is 22.7 lakh crore. I mean, that could be what it could be worth. And somewhere, I think, mindsets, when they change, corporate mindsets also change, they become more enabling, right?
Yeah.
You give more flexible environment for women to work and come back to work, right? So somewhere, we kind of still have to push the profit mentality to make companies think that it's good for us to have more women in the workforce. But it's also interesting about the male mindset that you mentioned, right? Like more men becoming hands on with non professional duties and chores. So, Nupur, how do you think? So, end of the day, of course, it's the social taboos, right? Across the various strata of society, a lot of women are dissuaded from joining the workforce. How do we change this mindset? Education, yes. Anything else that we can do which would affect the larger India?
So, education for sure. But honestly, I think that trying to change the society is a much more difficult task, because society has various components, and it's way too large for us to even try and adopt one particular approach. I think what we can do is we can try and change the workplace, because it's the same set of people who are in the society are in the workplace. And if we start to create awareness and change in the workplace, what we can hope is that the same men and women who are experiencing the workplace in a different manner can go back and start to change how things work at home, right? The conversations at home can change. So for example, in the workplace, if we can start building equitable cultures, if we can start doing, say, for example, trainings on unconscious biases and create that awareness, if we can encourage inclusive conversations, talent management can become very equal and very equitable. A lot of that starts to drive this consciousness that men and women are equal, everything else being equal, men and women
Yeah.
can perform equally. They're their peers. And the same thing, we can expect to go back home. And I that is what I think is within reach for all of us who are working professionals, because those are the ecosystems we can influence.
Right.
And yes, we can have organizations and the government that runs various campaigns, but we can't just wait for somebody else to drive change.
Right.
What each one of us can do is, in our spheres of influence, start to change the conversation. And I'm sure that will cascade forward.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you mention unconscious bias because that definitely has, permeated various aspects of recruitment, funding
Yeah.
for women-led startups. We see that women, not that many women are in the boards, right? We have about 12% only, which is still not a good figure. So how do we overcome unconscious bias? Do you think what should corporates do? Like a checklist?
I think the first step is awareness. And I have been through an unconscious bias training myself, and I walked into it thinking educated woman, progressive, this and that. And I obviously don't have any unconscious biases. And I came out so thoroughly humbled
Oh,
because I have grown up with the same stereotypes,
right.
right? And it was also one of those aha moments for me to realize that um, we are not doing these a lot of these things on purpose, right? So I was interviewing a young woman for the position of an analyst in my team, and I was asking her, where do you stay? The office is so far. You'll have very, very late working hours. How will you commute? And are you sure? And I was trying in my mind to sort of say, oh, Delhi's not a safe place. Should I do this? Should I do that? And because of this workshop, I realized, you know what? I won't have asked the same questions to a male candidate.
Correct.
And I am trying to assume on her behalf that it may not be safe, she may not be comfortable. And what
Right.
I need to do is just tell her my expectations and the role's expectations
Hmm.
and let it be her decision. If I think she's a great candidate, then let it be her decision if she thinks she can make the commute work, if she can work the hours that she might need to work, if she might be able to travel the way the role might
Right.
require her to, right? I mean, I shouldn't do that. So I think the awareness of our own biases and how they are influencing our conversations, our decisions, our transactions is very important. But it's also very important to keep following up these awareness sessions and these workshops
Hmm.
so that it's not a one time thing and people are constantly thinking about what next and how do I change. I think the
Right.
other thing that corporates can do is try and debias processes to the extent possible and remove human subjectivity, right? So for example, if you take so many large organizations say we have flexi work and remote working and all of that stuff, get your manager to approve it. The manager is human.
Hmm.
And if the manager has a team which has, say, two women
Yeah.
and, say, eight men, the
Hmm.
manager's gonna say it's just these two women who keep asking for this, the men don't. It starts to stand out as an exception. They start to stand out as people who are doing something that others are not,
Right.
right? So it is human discretion at the end of it that we have to try and remove so
It's more
that
technology.
technology and more objectivity. So I keep pushing this one and I keep saying that for organizations who are putting out these policies and saying we are so friendly to women, they should also keep evaluating how many of these policies and benefits are being used, how many women took advantage.
Yeah.
And that could be a very telling data point. I have not yet found research on this one, but I
Very
believe
interesting.
it could be a telling data point.
Also, who availed of these flexi work and remote work, and did it come in the way of their promotion and
Absolutely.
growth within the company? I think that's so
Absolutely.
interesting.
Absolutely. And you see, the other thing when you speak about women in leadership, when we read all of these books and we hear all of these podcasts, for
Hmm.
example, on what makes for leadership traits, we are talking about bold, we are talking about out there, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
created a persona of a
Yeah.
leader which is so male because historically, leaders have been predominantly male.
Yeah.
CEOs have been male, leaders have been male. So we've created the persona of a successful leader, which is molded on a male persona. And then, for women who are trying to fit into that, we hear so many examples of women when they are bold, they are called aggressive, right? If they are empathetic, they are called soft.
Soft.
So if they try to mold themselves within that, then it doesn't work. And if they're their authentic selves, it doesn't work either because they
Correct.
don't check any of the criteria. So a lot of this is stereotypes. A lot of this
Yeah.
is something that we've just grown up with.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it will take time to disrupt it.
Absolutely, and it's across industries. So I'll tell you, because my previous career, as you know, was as a journalist, and it was for a couple of television channels, and I used to cover politics. So for a young 20 something to be covering politics, you're anyway getting judged. Second thing is how you show up, how you look, what you're wearing. So there are so many things that women are fighting on a daily basis. I mean, you might be like that kid who just now got shamed so badly, trolled because of a hormonal issue. You could be very attractive and then you're called a bimber. If you're loud, as you said, you're called aggressive. And if you're not loud enough, then people will walk all over you.
Yes, you're not
I know I
assertive
had
enough.
absolutely. So I know that this is so true because you're right. I mean, these are male ideals of leadership that we've had to, for want of better word, kind of adhere to. Were there any preparations that you had to do in your career, when you started, when you look back, when you look back?
So honestly, I'm of the generation where few women was the norm, right? I went to a co-ed school, as it was called at that time.
Yeah.
We were four girls in a class of 48.
Wow.
Yeah. And all the way to when I went for my MBA at Sloan, we were, I think, about 11 women in a class of 110. So I think I've just grown up in a space where women were always few. So I never actively thought of myself as an outlier, as an exception. I don't think I ever actively realized if there was any discrimination going on. And I'm being very honest here. So I don't have a very fancy backstory which says I experienced discrimination or something, and that, that sort of gave me this urge to fight about it or anything like
Right.
that. Honestly, but I think what has worked for me, and I think that is something that you'll agree with, being like a successful professional yourself, is that when you get to work, you have to leave your gender aside. You just get to work as a professional and you make sure you do a damn good job. That is it. At the end of it, your work is your most powerful business card. And the moment we let the noise distract us, and was this because of my gender? Did I not get this because I'm a woman? Did I not do that? I think it starts to pull away our energies, and it doesn't allow us to focus on what
Yeah.
we do well. And ultimately, we have to focus on what we do well in order to be successful. Not to say that everything is, the playing field is level, etc.
Yeah.
But till we are able to change the playing field, I think as women, we really have to make sure that we are not getting bogged down by what we think could be discrimination because of our genders, but we just stay focused on what we enjoy doing and we really do a damn good job of that. Because then, obviously, success to aega. The other thing that I think women need to think about is how we integrate ourselves into the workspace, right? Um, we are part of the workspace. We are part of the male workforce. We don't need to change and look like them, but we have to be able to find that bridge.
Right.
We can't keep waiting for the world to change. My boss will change. My CEO will change. The
Yeah.
HR will change. We can't keep waiting for that change to happen. I mean, it's our careers, it's our life. We have to just reach out and grab opportunities, and we have to create that bridge, right?
Right.
People aren't used to seeing working women.
Yeah.
So we have to create that bridge and say, you know what, this is what working women look like.
Yeah.
This is what we expect. This is what our ambitions look like. But you know what? We have the ability to work with you. If you walk one step, we are also willing to do that. Or you know what? We'll walk the first step. So that bit about waiting for change to happen, I think can sometimes go against women. It is about integrating, not judging the others, because we have to remember a lot of this is unconscious, not intended.
Yeah.
So let's just be the bridges. Let's just reach out and bring our best professional selves.
I also think, and maybe this will be an unpopular opinion, but I find a lot of privileged women, including some of my friends and peers and acquaintances, who have support from family. They have the tools, they have the resources, to have people give them that support if they're a working mother, or if they're caring. Women are natural caregivers. They quickly take on the role of, taking care of an ailing parent or a kid, and all of that. And the privileged women, I find that when they take a break from work, they don't come back out of choice. And this for me is a big grouse, because I think I see a lot of women who don't have that choice. I see my domestic staff not having choice. I see the woman on the road not having choice. But I see a group of very privileged women who have support, who have privilege, who have the tools, but they choose not to come back to the working life. Do you see that as well? How do we keep them retained in the workforce?
What's wrong with them wanting to do that?
I mean,
Why should we judge women who don't want to work? It
but
is
it's a
about
growing
individual
group.
choice.
But it's a growing group of people who could be at the top, who could be senior women paving the way for others in their sector, as you do,
But
as
isn't
maybe I
that an
do.
unfair expectation on women? Come to work because we think you'll be a good example for others.
I think,
You know,
yeah.
so
I
I don't think
agree.
we should judge either the women who work or the women who don't work. Whatever it is about individuals' choice. As long as it was their decision. I do meet a lot of these really successful men who say, my wife and I met in business school, and she was so successful on doing XYZ, and then when we had kids, she decided to take a step back. She chose to spend time with the kids, and now she's working with a not-for-profit and this charity and that charity. So that is where I feel my hackles raise a bit, because I'm like, are you sure she had a choice?
That's my
Yeah.
point.
So are you sure she had a choice is a problem for me. But if she had a choice, and if she said, you know what, I don't want to do this, then that's her choice.
But sometimes, playing the devil's advocate, sometimes maybe the guy wants to take step off work and be a homemaker or a house husband or something like that, right? My issue is that if we have a lot of women not reaching the top, if we don't have enough women reaching senior roles, then we always keep that gap, and then we are the ones who keep saying that we don't have enough women in senior roles, and somewhere our peers, like our friends who could easily have made a comeback after a couple of years of whatever leave, choose not to do it because it's easier not to go back into the rut. A man doesn't have that
See,
choice.
Shutapa, it is very, very difficult to re-enter the workforce. Extremely difficult. And I'm not saying this only for women, even for men, because just look at the market. It is so
Absolutely.
competitive, right? It is extremely difficult. You may have to compromise on your seniority, your level, your job profile, your compensation, etc., right? So there is that consideration. The other thing is, I don't think women choosing not to work is the reason we don't have enough senior women. I think we have enough women in the workforce to at least change the percentages at the top level. So even if we say go back to private equity, venture capital, and we say 20% women in the workforce, there was a research done which looked at how many women in private equity and venture capital firms are in a position to influence capital allocation decisions, right? Not leadership. Leadership could include CFO, investor relations, fundraising, etc., but hardcore investing roles. That was 2.3%.
Gosh.
Yeah. So, and when Winpe did our report in 2022, we said entry level in our very self-selected sample, I would say, 49% women at entry level roles. For the women we have in the workforce, why don't we at least make an effort to help them grow all the way to the top? Retain talent, grow talent. Talent management has to change. It has to become a lot more objective. And I think that is something that is probably a lower hanging fruit than trying to say all of these women who could have come to the workforce, how do we bring them back? Like
Right.
first,
Don't
first
let them leave.
yeah, first look at the women you have.
Yeah.
How do you make them successful? And once all the other women see that there is longevity, there is sort of return for your investment, they will also come back. Right now, it's like, I'm going to go back, I'm going to be compromised, I'll get less salary, and you know what? For what? I'll not get promoted. Why should I do it?
We're not making it easier
We're not
in
making
any
it easier, we're
way.
not making it attractive. is, it has to be, it has to
Yeah,
be worth the investment. There is a lot of hard work that goes into being a working mother or a working
absolutely.
wife.
So, since you mentioned Winpe and we're coming to that part of our chat, why did you start Winpe? And please tell us the most bizarre and outrageous story that you heard from your members, because I know I've heard from you and I want it on the podcast.
Okay. So why I started Winpe, like I said earlier, I don't have like a very fancy backstory saying I experienced this and suddenly I wanted to fight for something. But I have had those little moments. For example, the unconscious bias workshop that I went through to realize that women are not, you know, immune to biases. I also had this experience where I had to keep a headcount open for about 2 years because my employer, my organization was forward leaning, and they said, "We don't care. You need to hire a woman." Right? So for 1.5 years, I couldn't hire a woman because all the top three that came to me were men. And then I had to borrow resources from different parts of the world. And, I was told, Nupur, you're going to lose this head count if you don't hire very quickly. So I said, okay, everybody move aside. And I told my assistant, you get me the dump of all the applications. And I am going to do this myself. 753 applications when we last advertised, 11 women.
Wow.
Statistically speaking, for them to go through multiple rounds and make it to the top three, the probability is close to zero. So that was another bit I realized. And this is when I was with the IFC. It's part of the World Bank Group. It's a great place that people would probably want to be a part of. It's a
Yeah.
place you could retire at, etc., etc. And if in that organization we are seeing such a low number of women apply, so that was a big red flag for me. And then with Winpe, I've read up some reports, and it says that 75% investors hire through their networks. So I had also spread the word through the teams, and the teams were all male analysts. They had spread
Yeah.
words in their networks. Finally, I hired because I reached out to my networks and I said, I want to hire a woman. Please tell me who all are available. Right? That's how I finally hired. But it was something
Challenging.
that came to my mind as being systemically wrong. And then once I started thinking about it, that was also the time that IFC was working on this report that it released in 2019, which really brought together data that linked the absence or presence of diversity in private equity and venture capital firms with financial performance, IRR and MOICs, right? And it said that diverse teams can give you higher than median IRR and higher than median MOICs. So, there was this awareness and thought process that was going on in my mind. And then, as an LP, as somebody who invests in private equity funds, I just thought to myself back in 2011 when I went on my first BD trip and I spent a week in Mumbai meeting all fund managers, sorry, how many women were there? And today, how many women are there as GPs and fund managers? The number hadn't changed.
Gosh.
So then again, it for me it was like there is probably something systemically wrong, because in this interim period of 8, 9, 10 years, there were enough women who could have grown to the top.
Yeah.
Right? It's not that we had zero women. So with all of that in mind, when I left my full-time role and I decided to do like a portfolio of things, I knew I wanted to do something about women in
Right.
in private equity. And then I reached out to the fund managers that I knew and I said, listen, I want to do something. For me, it was amazing. Everybody said, you know what, Nupur, we need to do something. Because the people I reached out to are talking to institutional investors, global investors, they're hearing the global conversation. And I think hashtag Me Too worked a lot in raising that conversation. Right?
Awareness.
They said, we really, really want to do something about it. We don't know what, we don't know how, and then we all have day jobs. So even in our list of priorities, this probably just keeps getting pushed to the bottom. You know the industry, we know you, we trust you. If you're willing to do something, we will work with you. So that is how the idea of Winpe was born. And because it's me, I said, we are not going to build a sisterhood because this is not about changing women. This is
Right.
not about telling women you need to do things
Yeah.
differently. We need to really change the industry and the workplace. So Winpe is really set up like an industry association. We work with 30 odd firms, and we work with them very closely in changing how they're hiring, how they're taking the conversation to their investee companies, how they're pushing the conversation to take women to senior roles, what they're measuring, how they're tracking progress. So really, really trying to transform the workplace in parallel, of course, because this transformation will take time. In parallel, we have a lot of resources for women. We have a 1:1 mentorship program. We do a lot of networking and community building, access to role models, workshops, panel discussions, etc. And the third bit is trying to convince young women that for all the perceptions from the outside, it is actually a very interesting and a very intellectually stimulating industry to be a part of. So we would love to see a lot more young women raise their hands and say, I want to be an investor.
Amazing. So, in your, it's been almost 4 years of Winpe, and I know you have a lot of stories. So, most bizarre story,
You
most bizarre
remember,
story
you didn't
without
miss that
naming
one.
names.
So I'll tell you, the one that really, really bothered me was a fund manager who checked with me if they could get additional management fees from their LPs, their investors, if they hired women. There
Wow.
was another conversation, and at some level, I thought it was understandable, but not understandable. Was a conversation when a fund manager said, you know what, if we have a woman in a senior role and she's leading a deal and she goes on maternity leave, what do I do? Like, she's not going to wake up one morning and say, hey, I'm on mat leave today.
Yeah.
You will have time to process it. You will have time to prepare for
Prepare.
it. And you will have time to make sure that either she's able to conclude the deal or there's somebody else who's going to pick it up. You will have time, at least a couple of months.
Yeah.
Right? So, some of these, and then on the other side, I've heard these stories. We used to have focus group discussions with young women in the same session. And I think it started because the first example was shared. In the same session, one woman said that she was going to get married, and her seniors got to know. And they asked her to sign an agreement which said that she will not leave the job for 2 years. She will not ask to move to a different city for 2 years. And then another girl said that, you know what, a similar thing happened to me. I wasn't asked to sign an agreement or a bond, but I had to send an email which said that for the next 2 years, I'm not going to ask, to leave and go to another office or go to another city. I'm not going to leave the job because I need to move.
I'm surprised they didn't say, I'm not going to conceive for the next 2 years. I would have expected that in the
Or
agreement as
maybe I'll
well.
not ask for a promotion. Maybe that was unsaid. And then a third young woman piped up and said that, you know what, I got married and my office asked me to produce a marriage certificate. They said, we want proof that you're married.
My
Why?
God. My God.
Why?
So
So
unnecessary.
unnecessary.
So unnecessary.
So, and it bothers us that in today's day and age, these kind of conversations are happening. But it's a reality, right?
And I remember the founder one, which we had discussed.
Don't talk of poor founders. So this young woman, not young woman, she's actually very experienced, very senior, worked with really large global corporations, and in really senior executive roles. And she turned entrepreneur, and she was told by a fund manager, "You sound very confident. थोड़ा needy sound करते तो हम पैसा दे देते."
My God.
And you want your entrepreneur to be confident in their idea. And
Yeah.
I mean, she's a senior executive, and that increases her chance of success, no? But what is this male
Absolutely.
ego?
Absolutely. And the other one, I remember you told me two founders, a male and a female, went to a pitching meeting
Oh,
with an
yeah, that
investor,
happens all the time.
and the investor kept talking to
To the
the
male, that
man.
happens all the time. Even when they're not co-founders, I have stories of female entrepreneurs who will probably go with a male team member. And the person in the room will talk to the male again and again,
To the junior,
to the
probably.
junior, and I'm the founder, but talking to him. And it happens even otherwise, right? It happens to lawyers, it happens to women investors.
Yeah.
They'll go with a junior male, but the assumption is that she's a I did this one conversation with Manisha Girotra at Moilis. She's running Moilis today. She was saying that when she was very young, they had to go for a deal to London and things like that. And something happened. and they needed to coordinate a meal for the client and all. And she was told, go into the kitchen and figure out the meal, because she was the only girl in the room, only woman in the
God.
team. And she's like, I didn't know how to cook. I wasn't the sort who cooked. But thankfully, there was another person, a
Assumption.
male in the team, who could handle that. But the
Assumption.
assumption, and there's um, I think it was Bhavna Thakur at Everstone who had once shared with me, and because they've already shared this and it's already out in public, I'm
Oh,
able to take
right.
their names. That she was asked to make coffee for a
Everybody.
meeting for the team. Right, so it's stereotypes. It's
Stereotypes,
stereotypes all the
absolutely.
way through.
Such a great discussion. I'm so glad you shared so openly and freely, and I appreciate that. Parting words, advice to young women professionals, and also women who want to be like you. You've had a prolific career. You've started and you still keep pushing. And what is your advice to these to the younger lot?
So thank you for that, Shutapa. But I think the first advice is we all have to carve our own paths. And I've never read any of these inspirational books or self help books or management books, because I think my journey is my own. And I would rather go through that journey myself based on how I think I want my life and what my priorities are. So I think my first message to young women is that we need to be a lot more confident in ourselves, and we need to be confident in carving out our own paths. We have to be really authentic in the truest sense and saying what makes us happy, what drives us. Because without drive and without happiness, we will not be successful. And as soon as we start to follow somebody else, I think we start to dilute that drive and that passion. So it's so important to carve out our own paths. We need to have confidence in ourselves. We need to have the courage to dream. And then we need to have the courage to go after those dreams. Because as they say, the worst you will hear is a no, which is not worse than not asking. Because if you
Absolutely.
don't ask, it is still a no. So you're not worse off if you ask. A very tactical advice is, and I think it has played a big role in my own success, is your choice of your life partner. For the young women who are looking at getting married and finding partners, it is so important. It is so important to find somebody who's going to respect you as an individual and support your aspirations and your ambitions. And for that, you really need somebody who's really secure in themselves, right? Who's not going to sort of say, oh my God, if she keeps working, she might become more successful, or she
Yeah.
needs to sit at home so that I could become successful. It is so possible for both the people to be successful. I think we
Absolutely.
have enough examples today where both the husband and wife have had equally successful careers.
Yeah.
So it's
And supported each other
and
through
supported
them.
each other as equal partners, right? So it is no longer about one person needs to take the back seat. It is no longer about that. And we need to have that clear conversation with ourselves and with whoever we want to partner with. And that is so critical.
Thank you so much, Nupur. Pleasure speaking with you,
My
and thank you for
pleasure.
joining us on What India Needs podcast.
Thank you, Shutapa. My pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on What India Needs podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, do like, share, and subscribe to our channel. If you have any feedback or want to see a guest featured, leave it in comments below. Thank you and goodbye.